name is Matthew. I'm 31, and this happened in the Hocking Hills area of Ohio. I'm saying it now because I still done sleep right when a branch taps the window. Maybe getting it out will help me stop listening for footsteps that aren't there. It started like any other dumb idea that sounds fine in a group chat. Early fall, first cold nights, leaves just starting to turn. We were 4. Me, my brother Josh, and 2 friends from work, Tyler and Nick. We've camped a bunch, state parks, a couple overnighters along the river. Nothing wild. This wasn't supposed to be wild either. The plan was 2 nights at a primitive spot off a forest road near Rockbridge. No hookups, no neighbors, just a flat clearing and an old fire ring. We did the checklist thing. Tents, headlamps, a cheap hatchet, water, jet boil, first aid kit, bear spray we've never used, 2 radios because Tyler thinks everything needs radios, and 3 knives that never leave their sheaths. Normal guy stuff. On the way out, we stopped for gas and snacks in Logan. At the counter, the cashier saw the bundle of firewood and pointed at our cooler. "You boys going out toward Big Pine?" Josh said, "Yeah, roughly." And the cashier did that look people do when they want to say more but don't want to be weird. She said, "Make sure you're on public land." We said we were and kept it moving. Out in the parking lot, a guy with sunburnt cheeks in a camo jacket lit a cigarette and watched us load ice. He had that milky stare that ignores you but also takes in every detail. I noticed it, didn't think much of it, and threw 2 bags on the beer anyway. We turned off the main road onto gravel around 4 in the afternoon. The shadows were long already. Those roads wind forever. No cell service the moment you pass the last mailbox. I drove. Josh navigated by memory and a screenshot of a map. Tyler and Nick bickered about whether a hammock counts as a real tent. We passed 2 pull-offs with other cars. We wanted our own spot, so we kept going. We found it around mile 8. A flat space under ash and oak, a ring of rocks blackened from old fires, a log with axe marks that had gone grey. It looked like it had been used 100 times and ignored for twice as long. No trash, no beer cans, always a good sign. We got out and did the usual, peeled off layers, stretched, claimed tent corners. Tyler turned on one of the radios even though we were standing 10 feet apart because that's Tyler. He clipped it to his chest like he was on a job site. "Comms up," he said. I rolled my eyes and hammered a stake. The first weird thing was small. When I walked into the trees to hang a bag line, I found a length of orange twine stretched between 2 low branches, about knee-high, like a trip line. Not tight, not fresh, sun-bleached. It had a bit of fray and mud on it like it had been there a while, but it was placed exactly where you'd walk if you were cutting through to the ravine. I stepped over it, tied my line farther in, and made a mental note to warn the others so we didn't faceplant in the dark. I came back and mentioned it. Josh shrugged. "Kids," he said, "or hunters, marking a path." He wasn't wrong. I let it go. We built a fire before it got too cold. Smoke sank into everything. We cooked brats, drank cheap beer, went quiet in that way you do when the trees get loud at dusk. If you've camped, you know that exact moment. Birds go from loud to gone, the air drops 5 degrees, and you remember that a lot lives out there without you. We were fine. We were laughing. We weren't idiots about food smells or leaving wrappers around. We did a clean camp. It mattered to me to do it right. Around 9, I took a walk out to the road with my headlamp to, take care of something. I clicked the light off for a second just to soak in the dark. It's pitch out there. The gravel road was a pale stripe, the trees a wall. That's when I saw a glow far down the road, low, moving slow. Headlights, not fast, not coming, just sitting. I figured it was a truck turning around or someone parking to go night hiking. People do that. I waited, headlamp off, and watched. The glow bumped forward once, then stopped. Then it clicked off completely. No engine sound reached me, but the wind had picked up and all I could hear was the leaves. I stood there too long for something that dumb. Then I told myself it was nothing and walked back. I didn't say anything. I wasn't trying to spook anybody. We got on with the night. Tyler busted out the radios again and showed us how to set a Roger beep like we were 12. I set my tent zipper 2 inches open to breathe and crawled into the sleeping bag. The last thing I heard before sleep was Josh cussing because he dropped a marshmallow in the fire. Sometime past midnight, a branch cracked close enough that the sound went through the nylon of the tent like a slap. Not the tiny twig pops you hear all night. This was weight. I froze, listening, pretending my breath wasn't hammering. Footsteps. I'm not going to dress them up. It sounded like footsteps. Not a deer's light tap-tap or a raccoon's scurry. It was 1, 2, 3, then silence, then a brush against leaves. Josh whispered from his tent, "You up?" His voice was too calm, the way people sound when they're trying to be the adult in the room. I whispered back, "Yeah." We lay there and did nothing like cowards. I had a pocket knife in the side pouch and it felt like a joke. I pictured some guy in a mask because my brain hates me. And then I got mad at myself for picturing things. After a minute, Tyler's radio crackled with some electronic chirp that sounded like a microwaved bird. It scared the hell out of me. He must have rolled on it. The woods went quiet again. In the morning, I half convinced myself that it had been a deer. We found nothing obvious. No prints we could read in the leaf litter. Nothing knocked over, no trash. But our wood stack had been moved. We'd stacked it next to the ring, crossways. In the morning, the top piece was shifted 6 inches to the left, like someone had nudged it with a boot and not put it back. I asked each of them. Nobody owned up. Tyler said it was probably us in the dark. Sure, probably was. But the ash bed in the fire ring had a new mark through it like a boot heel had dragged across. I noticed dumb things like that. "Raccoon," Nick said, deadpan. "Real tidy raccoon." We decided to do a day hike to the falls. Leave camp set so we didn't have to redo it. We hung the food bag higher, zipped tents, doused the coals with water until they stopped hissing. Tyler clipped one radio to the ridge line in his tent like a baby monitor. "Radio's on channel 3, he said. "If some meth head tries to unzip, we'll hear him." We joked about it, and then we actually set the squelch and left, like maybe it would do something. Half a mile down, I realized I'd forgotten my phone. I wanted pictures. I told the guys to go on and I'd catch up. I jogged back up the trail, breathing steam in the cool air. When I came into our clearing, I stopped so hard my boots slid. There were 2 men at the edge of our camp. Not close. On the opposite side of the fire ring from the tents, half hidden at the tree line like they'd just stepped into view and hadn't committed to it yet. One wore a navy hoodie with the hood up and a ball cap beneath. He had a beard that looked grown in rather than maintained. The other was older, bald on top, with a camo jacket and a puffy red face like he'd been in the sun all morning. The red-faced one was holding the end of Tyler's orange radio by the antenna, like you hold something you're not sure about. It dangled and swung slightly. All of our tent zippers were closed as far as I could see. Our cooler lid was shut. I said, "Hey!" like an idiot. My voice did the nervous thing where it jumps a note. They both looked at me at the same time and didn't look away when you would expect them to. The red-faced one smiled. I can't explain why that bothered me more than if he'd scowled. He just smiled like I'd brought him a package he'd ordered. "You guys camping back here?" he said. His voice was normal, like a neighbor. I said, "Yeah." He nodded and said, "Lots of folks getting lost back here." The other one didn't talk. He stared at my chest like he wanted to know what was in the pockets. The radio swung again, and he didn't hand it back. "Public land, right?" I said. My mouth was dry. He nodded. "Oh, sure," he said. "Lots of history around here, old graves, old things." He said it like a joke a local makes to freak out tourists. It wasn't even a good line. I tried to see their hands. I tried to see if they had anything else. I said, "Cool, we're heading out to the falls." I pointed like a tour guide. He nodded again and said, "We'll probably see you around." Then he set the radio gently on the log like he'd been about to anyway. and they both stepped backward into the trees, more like they were being pulled than like they were walking. I stood there and watched the brush move, listened for their steps. I didn't hear anything after 3 paces. I stayed another minute to make sure they weren't circling. Then I grabbed my phone and booked it down the trail. I caught up with the guys and said it fast and low so Nick didn't crack a joke that would make me want to punch him. Josh's face went flat. He gets that look when he's deciding if he should give in to the urge to just go home. Tyler said, "See, radios matter," which made me want to smash the radio. We argued for 10 minutes without raising our voices, which is a skill you only learn after growing up with the same people. We decided to cut the hike short, do an hour loop, and come back. If anything looked touched, we'd pack up and find a busier spot. We did that. The hike was nothing. None of us were looking at the waterfalls. We were looking behind us. We kept hearing gravel crunch in our heads, even though we were on dirt. A couple of times, we stopped and waited. No one came around the bend. I felt stupid and also pissed at myself that I couldn't turn off the piece of my brain that was scanning every sound. Back at camp, nothing obvious was wrong. Tent zippers still shut. Cooler lid still down. The radio was where he'd set it. The only thing that stuck out was this. Someone had tied a short piece of twine around one of our tent stakes, like a little flag. It was a half hitch, nothing fancy, tight enough to feel deliberate. It was the same color twine I'd seen by the trees the day before. I pulled it off and put it in my pocket and didn't tell the others because I knew how that would land. We ate quietly. I chewed and felt the grit of ash from the wind on my teeth. Around dusk, a car went down the gravel road. Windows up, no music. It wasn't the same as the lights the night before, different, quicker, but I watched it go and realized we were the only ones back here now. The 2 pull-offs we'd passed earlier were empty. It was us and whoever else wanted it more. At dark, we made a choice that I still think was the right one. We set a watch. Not because we're tough, because there were 4 of us and 2 nights and I wasn't gonna lie there and pretend sounds were mice. We ran it like we were 12 years old and trying to out-stupid a horror movie. 2 hours each. Tyler and Nick first, then me, then Josh. We kept the fire at a low, steady burn so we weren't broadcasting to the highway, but we had enough light to see the edge of the trees. We kept 1 radio on the log and 1 in Tyler's pocket. We kept our boots by the tent flaps. We kept our knives visible like that would matter. I don't even know what happened during Tyler and Nick's watch because they were the kind of guys who would downplay it so they didn't look spooked. When Nick nudged my foot at 2, he just said, "All quiet, buddy," and crawled into his bag. I got up, stretched, and immediately had to pee because that's life. I stood at the edge of the light, listened, and went 10 feet into the dark so I wasn't doing it in the campsite like an animal. That's when I heard it. Gravel. Not the distant road. Our road. That particular sound of a tire rolling slow on small stones. It was faint, and then it stopped. I clicked my headlamp off and held my breath so long my lungs burned, and in the silence I could hear the faint tick of cooling metal. You only hear that when an engine's been running. It's like a settling sound. Then a door latch popped. It was quiet, but once you know it, you know it. I crouched, my legs shook. I reached back and tapped the radio. "Tyler," I whispered. "Up." He grunted. I said, "Up, now." We stood in the dark without turning on lights. The fire was low enough that if you were 20 yards out, you wouldn't see us, but we could see the first line of trunks. Josh slid out of his tent like fog. Nick swore under his breath and shook old candy wrappers off his jacket. We didn't talk. We just looked. The woods didn't give us anything. 10, 15 minutes, nothing. It would have been almost funny if I hadn't heard the door. Then a voice from the trees, not loud, like the person didn't want to wake someone else. "Evening." Just that. Like a neighbor. It came from the direction of the road, but not on the road. We couldn't see him. The hair on my arms stood up so hard it hurt. Tyler said, too chipper, "Evening," like he was greeting a customer. The voice said, "You boys doing a vigil?" That word, that specific word, it landed weird, like an inside joke we weren't inside for. I said, "Just camping." The fire popped and we all flinched like idiots. The person didn't step in. He stayed where he was. He said, "You see the markers?" I felt that word in my stomach. Markers. I didn't want to ask, "What markers?" Because I didn't want to play the game, but I heard my own mouth say, "What markers?" He said, "Old graves, they're all through here." He said it like he was telling us about mushrooms we shouldn't eat. Then he said, "Some folks like to sit out with them." I swear to God, my hand started shaking so bad I had to put it in my pocket so the knife didn't flick against the sheath and make a noise. "I'm not proud of this next part," I said. "We're not interested in anyone's stuff." That's literally what I said, anyone's stuff, like I was warning off a yard sale. He didn't answer. There was a long pause where the night noises got loud again, like they'd been holding their breath too. Then I heard one slow step on leaves, like he'd shifted weight. Then nothing. I didn't even realize I'd been clenching my jaw until it felt like a tooth cracked. We stood there another 20 minutes. At some point, the fire sank low enough that it wasn't tea, giving us anything but red and a dry heat on our shins. Tyler bent and fed it 3 small pieces so it flared just enough to show us each other eyes. No more voices, no more steps. Eventually, we heard the gravel again, faint, then louder for a second, then fading. That metal tick sound again, a door eased shut, and then finally the night widened back out. After half an hour of nothing, we let ourselves breathe. We didn't go back to sleep. We sat with our backs to each other's, tense, with our headlamps around our necks and the radios on the log. Every now and then, the radio would hiss like it does when it sits too close to something metal. It felt like a tiny electric warning every time. Dawn took forever. It always does when you want it. When it got light enough to see more than silhouettes, we spread out and looked for tracks. We found some, hard to read in the leaves, but there were flattened spots at knee-width intervals where someone had stood behind a fallen log and watched. The log faced our camp at an angle that gave a view of the fire and both tents. We found a cigarette butt pressed into the dirt at one end. It was still damp like it had been in someone's mouth recently. I don't smoke, but I picked it up with a stick anyway. The filter had teeth marks and a faint ring of something dark on it that could have been old blood, could have been coffee, could have been anything. My brain chose the worst option and kept it. We also found something else, a small rectangle of tin with a hole punched in the top and a piece of orange twine through it, like a crude tag. It had faint scratches on it that might have been letters once. I could make out a K and maybe an L or an H if I squinted. Josh didn't want to look at it at all. Tyler said it was probably a survey marker, but it wasn't staked to anything. It was just sitting by the base of a sapling at ankle height, half tucked under leaves, like someone had dropped it and meant to come back. Right then I wanted to pack and walk out. We had a second night planned, but I was done planning anything there. Josh didn't argue. He used his clipped, short-syllable voice that means decision made. "We're out," he said. Tyler complained, not because he wanted to stay, but because leaving felt like losing. And Tyler hates losing, even when the game is made up. Nick kept making jokes that didn't land. He does that when he's freaked. He said, "What, you scared of Boy Scouts?" I didn't answer because my jaw hurt again. We took 10 minutes to police the area and make it look like we were just gone for the day. We doused the fire, spread the ash, packed the cooler, and left the tent standing. The plan was to hike out on foot to the last spot where we had a bar or two of signal, call a buddy with a bigger truck to meet us, and then come back in convoy to break down fast. We wanted witnesses. We wanted to make it boring. We took only what we didn't want to leave behind if it got rifled. Wallets, keys, the knives. Everything else stayed. It felt like a gamble. It was a gamble. We left at 10. The hike to the signal spot wasn't short. We got one bar near a bend by a big boulder where the ridge clears. We called my friend Eric. He lives in Lancaster and drives a lifted Tacoma because of course he does. He said he could be there in an hour and a half. While we waited, we sat on the boulder like kids at a bus stop. That's when we heard the radio's chirp, ours, back at camp. It was faint because of the distance and trees, but it has a sound that's hard to mix up. That stupid Roger beep Tyler set. It bled through the static for a second, then again 2 quick beeps, like someone pressing transmit without talking. Tyler looked at me like he wanted permission to believe he'd imagined it. Then it happened again. Beep. Beep. We didn't say anything. What was there to say? If it was wind or interference or the dumb thing glitching, fine. If it wasn't, then someone had a finger on the button in our camp. Eric showed up 20 minutes early like an angel with bad taste in decals. We didn't tell him a big story. We said we had weird neighbors and wanted to pack fast and not argue. He nodded. If you grew up where we did, you know not to make a scene and not to assume people want to be on YouTube. We drove back in with his truck behind ours, slow and straight, no dust, windows open so we could hear before we saw. Our camp looked the same from the road. Up close, it wasn't. The tents were zipped, but my rainfly was half unclipped on one corner like someone had lifted it and let it drop. The radio was on the log with the volume turned all the way down. That's why we hadn't heard it when we walked up. There was a little pile of pebbles next to it that hadn't been there. 5 stones, like someone set them as a kid might. The cooler had mud on the lid from a boot. There were no footprints I could read, just disturbed leaves. The tin tag we'd found by the sapling was now on top of my tent, centered, twine dangling off the side like a lazy fuse. We broke down camp in 5 minutes flat. You can do it that fast when you're motivated. Poles snapped, stakes yanked, everything jammed into bags, no folding. We did a shoulder check to make sure nothing was left but cold ash and a clean ring. That's when the car rolled by, not stopping, just rolling. A sedan, dark color, low to the ground, 2 people in the front, windows up, no plates on the front bumper. It didn't slow down. It just drifted past with the weight of someone looking without wanting to be obvious about looking. Josh said, "Let's go," to nobody in particular. On the way out, half a mile down, we saw a piece of orange twine tied to a branch at the height of a truck mirror. It had a knot and a short tail, so it would catch your eye. If you've never felt your stomach drop while sitting upright, that is what it does. It slides away from your spine and sits in your lap where your hand should be. Eric reached up and pulled it down without slowing. We didn't go to a ranger station. We should have. We didn't call the sheriff. We should have done that too. Here's the honest truth. We were embarrassed. It sounds like nothing when you say it out loud. Some guys in the trees, a cigarette butt, a couple pieces of string, a car with no front plate. Lots of history around here. It adds up to a feeling and not a clean report. Nobody threatened us with words. Nobody flashed a gun. It was just enough to let us know there were lines out there, and we'd stepped across one we didn't see. Back home, I dumped my pack in the garage and took a shower, hot enough to make my skin red. My pocket buzzed later with a text from an unknown number that said, "You left this," and a blurry picture of a tent stake on dirt. It could have been anywhere. Could have been from a junk text and a wrong number. Could have been nothing. The area code was 740, same as Hocking County. I blocked it. I told myself not to be dramatic. Then I threw out the stake it looked most like, which is also dumb, and I know it. For weeks after, I'd be walking my dog at night and hear gravel in my head. I'd stop at the corner near the empty lot and listen, because I swear there was the click of a door latch somewhere just out of sight. I started checking the backyard gate twice. I put motion lights on the side of the house. I told my neighbor I'd buy his old trail cam, and then immediately felt like I was letting fear run my wallet. I bought it anyway. For 2 months, I didn't eat look at the images most mornings, because I knew there'd be a raccoon and didn't want to know if there'd be more. I've thought a lot about what those guys were actually doing. I don't know. Maybe they were bored and drunk and the woods is their living room. Maybe it's a local thing people do to keep city idiots from leaving trash. Maybe there really are old graves back there, and they think they're re-guarding something that doesn't need guarding. I can tell you the part that isn't a story. The watch felt necessary, and I don't regret it. The leaving felt like a win, even though it didn't. And that word, vigil, still hits my brain sideways like it belongs to a group of people who done introduce themselves. I haven't camped since. Josh says he will again if it at a site, with numbers and a loud neighbor in a fifth wheel watching college football. Tyler pretends he wants to go deeper and do it right. But even he looks at the tree line longer than he used to when we hike. Nick jokes about it when we grill. He'll say, "Hey Matt, got your markers?" And I laugh because it is easier than explaining that sometimes I get a flash of the radio swinging by its antenna and that dumb smiling face, and I have to put my hands under cold water until it passes. That's what I've got. No punchline, no reveal. Just a couple of guys who wanted a quiet weekend and found out the quiet belonged to somebody else. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Please like, share and subscribe to Mr.Ebon for more real horror stories like this. Trust me, there's more out there than you think.